I can call out a factual thing that a company doesn't do correctly. And the Twitter sphere, like, again, the masses of unnuanced, like, retail investors, Mike said Binance is going to fail. Not once did I ever say that. I just said this is a company that's not behaving the way that you'd want a company where you're custodying your assets at. I don't know what's going to happen. I hope they become less relevant, because if they continue to behave like this, eventually there's going to be real problems. And of course, CZ served jail time and they paid a multi-billion-dollar fine. So irrespective of the business today, those claims are largely been validated and proved to be correct. Yeah. Part of why it's a safer company today is because smart people who actually knew what was going on and weren't afraid of repercussions. Because remember, everyone's so conflicted in this industry. All the VCs can't talk about it. A lot of the influencers are getting paid by the companies. And I'm one of the only independent voices with any credibility who's able to even talk about it. Yeah. And I thought it was incumbent upon me, given what I knew, the dozens and dozens of things I saw at Celsius, BlockFi, Voyager, Binance, to talk about them.
Today, we're joined by Mike Alfred, the founder of Alpine Fox LP and non-executive director at Bitcoin miner AI Infra Play, IREN. We brought Mike on to talk about Bitcoin mining stocks, the AI HPC trade, and how to evaluate energy-related stocks. We also grilled him on his use of Twitter, if he thinks his history of Twitter calls has been ethical, and why he deletes his tweets. Thank you to PubKey for letting us record the show on site. PubKey is the best place in New York City to buy a beer with Bitcoin. The show is brought to you by Cleanspark, America's Bitcoin miner. More on them during the show. And the mining pod wouldn't be complete without us giving away free Bitcoin miners. Yes, that's right. We're giving away 20 BitX units over the rest of 2025. We've already given out 4. We have 16 more to go. Go to @BlockspacePod on Twitter or click below in the show notes to enter. Lastly, bonus episodes of the Mining Pod. Head to our dedicated channels on Spotify, Apple, or your podcast player of choice. Subscribe to that channel and get dedicated bonus episodes. You can only find those on our official dedicated channels. Okay, a few words from our sponsors, and then on to the conversation.
You ever get into your buddy's car and think, dude, how do you live like this? There's half-eaten Taco Bell on the console, a pile of garbage and fast food cups and bags, rumbling in the trunk. You look behind you under your seat and you're pretty sure you saw something move, but you don't know what? Well, how do you think your Bitcoin miner feels if you're not keeping on top of your filtration game? Y'all need to get on Colorado Air Filters. Colorado Air Filters is a major supplier of air filtration systems for Bitcoin mining sites. And they're currently running a summer sale on their inventory, so now is the time to act. Whether you need HEPA filters, new shipments or installations for your containers or your large-scale mining facilities, retrofitted buildings, Colorado Air Filters has it all. And units are ready to sell now. Contact sales at coloradoairfilter.com and use the code MININGPOD to claim 15% off today. Again, that is sales at coloradoairfilter.com with code MININGPOD.
Hey, Will here with Blockspace Media. Did you know that we have individual feeds for all our shows? If you're watching the Mining Pod, Bitcoin Season 2, or the Court Show, be sure to check out the individual feeds. You can find them on your podcast player of choice, whether that be Spotify, Apple, YouTube, etc. Just type in Blockspace Media and you'll find all our shows pop up, or just type in the individual show name like the Mining Pod or Bitcoin Season 2. Be sure to hit that subscribe and give us a 5-star rating so we can continue to bring you the best content in Bitcoin. Welcome back to the Mining Pod, presented by Cleanspark. On today's show, we are joined by Mike Alfred, non-executive director, board member at IREN, and also managing partner at Alpine Fox.
Yep, founding
manager partner.
Yep.
Okay, let's start there. When did you start Alpine Fox?
I started working on it in October of 2022, like as the last bear market was kind of coming into the landing. I thought there would be an opportunity to buy some of these infrastructure stocks in particular at a great discount to what I thought their long-term fundamental value was. And I went to a conference in Miami, was on stage with Nick Carter actually, and it was just the two of us. It was like a fireside chat, but kind of dual way. Yeah. And afterwards, a guy came up to me at dinner and was like, well, what are you doing now? And I said, well, I'm kind of just like doing nothing. I'm kind of like tweeting and being obnoxious on the internet. And I'm on the board of this company called IREN that no one had heard of at the time. Yeah. And he said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I think it'd be cool to start a fund. He's like, well, what kind of fund? Literally in 3 to 4 minutes, we agreed to terms. And that's still to this day my one outside LP. It's basically a billionaire family office from the Midwest, and then it's basically just my money and theirs. And I've been really resistant to taking more capital. So it's still just the two of us. I had a whole bunch of like $1 to $5 million type tickets, and I looked at the people that were offering the money, and I thought to myself, I said, you're going to slow down what I'm doing. I'm trying to build something really unconventional. Yeah. Right. It's not an asset manager that's about raising money and becoming a fee generation machine. It's more about generating like absolute return. Everybody says that, but a lot of people don't build the structure to do it. So I'm like very long-term oriented, like 3 to 5 year minimum timeframes, more of a permanent capital mindset. I'm doing zero fundraising. Like if money comes in at some point, it'll be because I just did nothing and let it come in via the performance, not chasing it down, trying to get new subscription agreements. So it's a very different mindset. It's very unconventional. And a lot of people, when I tell them the story, they're saying that sounds crazy. And I kind of like that feedback.
Yeah. And then before that, you were in the mining space before, in like larger Bitcoin space, right?
Yeah. I mean, I had a couple of software companies. One was like traditional financial data. Another one was crypto data. It's kind of how I got into this space. And then when I sold the second one to NYDIG, I hired a guy from Blackstone, and we talked to like every Bitcoin miner in the whole space, basically public or private. I got to know everyone. And during that period of time, I identified IREN it was called Iris Energy at the time, as a very high potential company because of the founders, because of their infrastructure background. They had a very different approach to thinking about the market. And so the moment I left there, they actually reached out when they heard that I left NYDIG and said, hey, we're thinking about going public with JP Morgan. And this was September, October of 2021. They ended up getting out the week before Thanksgiving, November, in the IPO. And I joined the board the month before, but they said, look, we're going to turn over the board. Like, are you interested? I said, absolutely. I'm not really doing anything. Yeah. Like I'm tweeting and hanging out with Lynn Alden and spaces and stuff. But other than that, I'm not really doing anything. And so it just was great timing. And I joined the board before I started the fund. So it's not activist, right? It's like, it's nicer to be invited on and then later be able to provide feedback and guidance and strategy and capital allocation, et cetera, expertise when you're already on the inside where it's like totally beneficial to both sides versus someone coming in from the outside trying to force change.
So IREN's an interesting miner for me. I've been wanting to pen a piece about like why I got IREN wrong, because I didn't have personally anything allocated towards it this cycle. And I didn't necessarily think they were not going to do well. And I definitely saw your tweets the entire way up from like $2 to what's it, broke 30 today.
Yeah. It's 31, like 50 after hours.
Yeah. So I definitely saw your tweets the whole way up. I think my first way of like meeting them was through the stuff that happened with NYDIG and IREN back in the day. And so like that kind of colored some of my thinking. And then since then I've been like, okay, it looks like they are monetizing a lot of megawatts in the West Texas desert. Like, is this actually going to turn into a GPU play? That turned out to be correct, and they're absolutely crushing that. What gave you that confidence early? Can you describe a little bit more about that, about meeting Will and Dan? Yeah,
sure. I'm a really tactile investor, right? Like I take big concentrated positions, and in order to do that successfully over a long period of time, like they can't just be tickers on a screen. Like you have to be in the business. Like you have to get in and talk to management. You need to understand how they think about the business. You need to understand how they run the business. You have to understand what makes them tick. Same thing you do when you're like seed stage investing, which is something that I also do, right? Which actually helps. I mean, really, like a lot of my edge comes from, I have been CEO multiple times, 2 exits.
You still have your hair. That's good.
I like everything from leading a seed round all the way up to post IPO governance, sitting on an audit committee or a comp committee or whatever. And I'm able to see across the whole life cycle now because I've done it in multiple contexts. So people say like in venture, people are the most important thing. So it's like the people, the market size of the idea. Like if you talk to Sequoia, it's like, is the market big enough and interesting enough? And then is that the team, or those the people that actually have the magic to do it? It's really not that different for larger kind of pre-IPO companies, especially in a space like this where you could go public when you're really subscale. And so again, having spent time with 30 or 40 management teams, I had a huge edge over the market. I tried to explain this to people on Twitter, right? I tried to explain that I had that edge, but again, nobody cares until they see the results.
Yeah.
But I just knew from a character standpoint, from a mentality standpoint, from an experience standpoint, from a strategy standpoint, that they were highly differentiated. And so I made my bet And at least for now, the market's sort of validating that. You don't get them all right, but if you have a good track record of picking out winning people that have high integrity and like really know what they're doing, then you tend to be able to outperform people who are just analyzing the data. Because a lot of the data that people are using in investing, it's backwards looking.
Yeah.
It doesn't tell you what's going to happen in the future. And there was really nothing about IREN in December of 2022 that would have given you the perspective that I had unless you were deep into it already.
Well,
like
I think that's where it's like interesting for me because I was pretty deep into it, but I definitely had more of a backwards look. So like the numbers, like they were strong in the pack, right? They've always had great efficiency. They've always been able to compete with the top 5. They've always had capital allocations to kind of get those large Bitmain orders at the time. But to me, like nothing really stood out. So I'm just curious from your perspective, like, was it like Will and Dan's execution history? Was it something about like what, I mean, they're shaping up to be like a new neo cloud, right? Which is very, very different from the rest of the Bitcoin mining class that's out there. So I'm curious, like what from 3 years ago did that for you? If there was one thing.
Everything they said they would do, they did on time, under budget. No one else in the history of the institutional Bitcoin mining space at scale has ever done that. In fact, it's the polar opposite. It's been one of the most underperforming industries with the highest comp for management relative to actual execution, actual shareholder results. And so it's actually quite a dicey space to invest in. But I'm so concentrated that I've only needed to pick like 1 or 2 winners. I'm not looking to own the whole space. But look, I've been doing this type of thing for a long time, right? Evaluating management teams, understanding how people think, watching the results.
Yeah.
I've been doing public related investing for basically 25 years.
Yeah.
So what's the magic to that? I don't know. I mean, I think some people have the ability to assess these things with a better sense of the probabilities than others. Look, other people had different views in the past. I've made my arguments, and when it works, everybody says, oh, you must have known something. When it doesn't work, they say, oh, you must have gotten unlucky.
Yeah. So
I prefer to be lucky, and I prefer to be right and all that, but like you don't always get it right. In this case, I did. And I think basically the edge comes down to like a better ability to assess probabilities, a better ability to assess people. And again, these guys just consistently did what they said they were going to do. The market didn't believe it until they did it long enough that you could get the full re-rating. That's happening now.
Yeah.
The current thing the market doesn't believe is that a legacy Bitcoin miner can compete with CoreWeave or Nebius or any of these companies on cloud. And I strongly disagree with that because in my view, IREN's already doing it today. And I think it's about to be more obvious. And of course, by the time that happens, there's the re-rating's already in the stock. So a lot of people will wait until it's super obvious and the stock will be even higher, right? But that's the nature of investing.
Why do you think they can compete against that? I mean, if you look at some of the work from semi-analysis or others out there, I know you're smirking, but I want to hear like why.
I mean, that analysis, as far as I'm concerned, is been completely debunked. I mean, it wasn't even completed.
I don't mean like just that March report. I mean like in general, like the like jumping from a that early status of just like kind of getting into it versus like all the way up is difficult.
Look, there's the conventional wisdom is often wrong. Yeah. There are a lot of narratives that have been spread by sort of incumbent companies who, by the way, are under tremendous pressure right now for various reasons. Although Nebius got a reprieve yesterday, a lot of those companies, they don't control the infrastructure stack. I actually think over 5 or 10 years, the biggest and most challenging part is to control the physical infrastructure. The narrative that's floating around today is that your orchestration layer, your software, your middleware is what's going to drive value. And I think that's completely wrong. Now, that's a non-consensus view. But as you know, like over long periods of time, you have to be non-consensus and right to make a lot of money in markets. So I prefer when I'm in sort of alone in the crowd as opposed to being in a big group of people. The masses seem to believe that the existing like neo clouds that have a big brand today are going to be the long-term winners. I actually think they're going to have tremendous service delivery issues because they have a hodgepodge of physical infrastructure operators through which they need to deliver service with a very high level of service to these very demanding hyperscaler style customers. And I'm pretty sure without controlling the physical infrastructure that they're going to struggle to do that. And I think CoreWeave recognized that and went out and tried to acquire Core Scientific. We'll see if that deal actually closes. But that's sort of an admission of sorts of what I've been saying this whole time, which is that there's no way they can continue on the path they are. They financed a bunch of GPUs that are sort of previous generation now that are depreciating very quickly relative to the newest generation. And they use pretty expensive financing to do that. And I think someone coming in today that owns the full stack, keeping in mind that anybody who controls a full stack AI data center business today is using it primarily for their own use cases, like a Tesla or something like that. And then the larger players that haven't delivered a full AI data center, they're not going to have those data centers ready for 3, 4, 5 years. So there's this time to power arbitrage that if you own infrastructure today that you can bring online quickly or is already online, and you can plug in GPUs, burn them in, and get them humming and generating revenue, I think there's a window here where there could be some displacement of the status quo. And again, I'm not really trying to spend a lot of time convincing anyone of that, because I have more clarity in terms of what I see already happening on the ground than the rest of the market. And it's not my job to convince everybody that's true. It's just my job is just to take advantage of it and let the market find out 6 months or a year from now that that's the case. Because that's where alpha comes from. Like if everybody agreed with me right now, then there would be no excess performance. Like you might as well buy the index, right? And that's not how I invest. Like I actually need people to disagree with me. And that may create like a view that people may have that I'm more combative than the average person. That may be true, may not. It doesn't really matter to me. My job is to generate performance, right? So I don't really care.
How do you fit your Twitter account into that consensus? Because like if your job is not to necessarily bring people into the fold of like your investment thesis, but you tweet a lot about your investment thesis, like how do you conflate those two ideas together?
I don't use it to actively convince people. I just explain to people what I'm doing, and then I let the market figure out whether that's right or wrong. Turns out though, if you're right over a long period of time, you will aggregate a lot more attention organically. It's not something that I like search for and grasp at. It's something that just happens organically by making these calls and turning out that they're right over time. It was never intentional to have a big following in the first place. Like for years I had a Twitter account, barely used it. I would just like post my own Wall Street Journal articles, like kind of like a 10-year-old view of how to engage with social media, or like a corporatized way where you just post like the official stamp of approval and the compliance approved version of the marketing materials.
Which is not the main.
And that's not how you get big.
Now.
You have to be sort of polarizing. You have to say stuff that people don't agree with. You have to get in arguments occasionally. That mostly happens accidentally. Like I never look for that, but in this space, candidly, there's just a lot of people who don't know what they're talking about. And I do enjoy like reminding people of that. And again, like, it's one of those things where like a lot of people will love it. Some people will hate it. You become polarizing, you get bigger. I think in the long run, there is some value. I mean, I have had opportunities, right? Like I'm about to probably join another public board, and probably wouldn't have gotten an IREN's board in the first place if I didn't already have some audience, but now it's a lot larger. And so now a lot of other public companies that are in similar situations to where IREN was 3-4 years ago are asking, well, they're thinking differently. They don't just want like a gray-haired 60-year-old guy who used to be CEO who does nothing about the industry to rubber stamp stuff from the audit committee. They want people who can get in the trenches and build, because that's sometimes what it takes. That separates the companies that are thinking conventionally from the ones that are thinking unconventionally. IREN thought very unconventionally. Yeah. They've tolerated a level of engagement from a board member that, and both tolerated and encouraged, in the sense that like when we went public, right, at IREN, they were an Australian domiciled company with facilities primarily in Canada and a newer facility in Texas that had a Nasdaq US listing and no brand awareness. And I had maybe 30,000 or 20,000 followers. And just sort of organically, because I wanted the company to succeed and I was an investor and I was on the board, I just started talking about the company. Yeah. And that sort of accelerated. And now a lot of people remember that I was the one that they didn't know what IREN was 2.5 years ago or 3 years ago when it was a 50 or 100 million or $150 million company. Now it's an $8 billion company. And so correctly or incorrectly, people will ascribe they'll sort of say, hey, maybe this, this activity that Mike was taking is part of that story. I think at the end of the day, it comes down to execution and delivering. Like if you have a guy with 1 million followers and he talks about your stock all the time, but you don't hit your numbers, you don't deliver, like you don't deliver a great business, then it doesn't matter. It's only an accelerant in so much as the business actually delivers the results. But because I'm a professional investor and I do that for a living, my history of being able to probabilistically weight the odds of certain things happening with certain companies is higher. And so like I only come talk about a company when I've already underwritten it to a level that most 99% of retail investors just aren't going to be able to, either because of the lack of the ability to do it analytically, the lack of information, the lack of access to management, not having worked in the space. you got to use every edge you have. The U.S. capital markets, particularly publicly traded equities, I rule VC out because VC is basically for anyone. Like anyone can do VC. Anyone can get $5-10 million for VC. There's no mark to market. Like no one even knows if you're good at it for 10 years. Mark to market public equity investing is the hardest game in the world. If you are not very intense and if you have not determined what your edge is, you're going to get blown up.
It's right behind podcasting as the toughest profession out there.
We are Cleanspark, America's Bitcoin miner, a publicly traded company with the largest operating hash rate, powered entirely by self-operated infrastructure across 4 states. This is our proof of work, and we are setting the standard for what's next. Learn more about the intersection of energy and Bitcoin at cleanspark.com.
I want to talk about Binance though. So last cycle, you were a pretty vocal critic that Binance was going to flop.
Well, that's not actually what I said. I didn't say it was going to flop. I said I thought they were doing things that would later be viewed as quite nefarious, like running in-house market makers in the same way BitMEX was in liquidating customers.
Okay.
Right? Like supporting people using accounts for things like money laundering and Iranian National Guard and like people that were already under, like they were under a lot of scrutiny and they allowed that anyway because it was good for their business. There were accounting issues. There were redenomination issues in terms of taking deposits in one. They didn't have all the coins at one point. They had to redenominate back, and their stable coin they admitted publicly was not fully back one-to-one. So these are facts. Like the thing that people extrapolate, they don't understand the nuance. I can call out a factual thing that a company doesn't do correctly, and the Twitter sphere, like again, the masses of unnuanced like retail investors. Mike said Binance is going to fail. Not once did I ever say that. I just said this is a company that's not behaving the way that you'd want a company where you're custodying your assets at. I don't know what's going to happen. I hope they become less relevant because if they continue to behave like this, eventually there's going to be real problems. And of course, CZ served jail time and they paid a multi-billion-dollar fine. So irrespective of like the business today, those claims are largely been validated and proved to be correct. I never made a call. It wasn't a short for me. Like I never tried to go short BNB.
Well, it's a private company, right? Oh, I guess BNB, you could do something with that.
But like that was never really the interest. The interest was to call out the raft of bad behavior with exchanges and lenders in the space, which included BlockFi, Celsius, Crypto.com, Binance, Voyager. Right? There's a whole crew of these. Some of them had big enough balance sheets that even though they had redenominated and they didn't have all their stablecoin wasn't back, whatever, they survived. But that's a totally different question than whether they did anything wrong in the first place. You can do wrong things and get away with it. Tether was not fully backed for a long time, but there was no way to redeem Tether. There's no window to like go get your dollars back, and maybe nobody ever wanted to do that. And so they never found out. And years later, now they've found a way to become fully backed, and a lot of it's in treasury. So people can adjust. Binance could be fine now, and maybe with the court-appointed monitor and with a new CEO and with more compliance and a real board governance structure and a real CFO. Again, all things they didn't have when I was criticizing it. Part of why it's a safer company today is because smart people who actually knew what was going on and weren't afraid of repercussions. Because remember, everyone's so conflicted in this industry. They're all the VCs can't talk about it. A lot of the influencers are getting paid by the companies, and I'm one of the only independent voices with any credibility who's able to even talk about it. And I thought it was incumbent upon me, given what I knew, the dozens and dozens of things I saw at Celsius, BlockFi, Voyager, Binance, to talk about them. I never said, I did say Celsius would collapse. Because that one was just absolutely egregious. And I knew Alex Mashinsky before he even came into crypto. So my alarm bells were ringing before I even realized that they got fired from multiple custodians and they had a huge hole in their balance sheet.
Was a mess.
Right. But look, there were dozens of companies that collapsed in that window, and Binance, thank God, being the sort of largest exchange, didn't. But I think largely because there was enough pressure from the outside for people to look at all the things they were doing that were really irresponsible. And if it had not been checked at some point, probably eventually would have led to real problems. They weren't substantially different than FTX in the way they operated. They just were so big that they never got caught.
Did Binance ever reach out to you? Like CZ ever?
No. He blocked me on Twitter. I did a long podcast once on this on FTX, Binance. Right. It was like an hour with this journalist who's like an expose journalist. And we went through like literally for an hour, like hundreds and hundreds of factual points. And like I said, the nuance here is you could say that somebody's not doing something correctly without saying that they're going to fail.
Yeah.
What the Twitter sphere decides to believe about that is like not really my issue. There are a lot of like not that intelligent people with not that much life experience, with not that much business experience, who will hear one thing, and because they're conflicted because they have money in Binance, they'll say, oh, this guy hates Binance and wants it to collapse. I never wanted to collapse. It's bad for the industry. What I wanted is for them to reform and stop trading against their customers and stop redenominating the coins and stop like fully back their stable coin.
Yeah.
All things which like have been rectified via the regulatory system.
Yeah. So I asked that question to kind of tee up IREN and like the new wave of social media influencers, activist managers out there. I'm not saying you're either of those things, but just kind of laying the landscape. And then
Are you saying I'm a mini Bill Ackman now for Bitcoin mining?
Exactly. You're going to be deciding the mayoral race here in New York pretty soon here. And then like some people like yourself who've kind of moved in from big Twitter account, and then you can talk about like the things you're investing in. And some people are just influencers. They're broke as hell and they're talking about whatever. Some people have a huge fund behind them, like yourself, and have done the work to understand things. And then there's people in between the spectrum there.
Yeah.
I'm interested to get your reflections on like if this is good for everyone to have like this sway of information out there on like buy this stock, pump this stock, be a part of this movement. The one name that comes to mind as I'm asking this question is this Eric Jackson guy who's really into open. He's into Cypher recently,
He's
and
hanging out
IREN.
at Drake's house with a sign.
Yeah, I mean he's really pushing it. I mean he's obviously done a lot for the open community and whatever community that is. But there's also questions of like, okay, is this like where's the ethical lines, and does this get blurry at all? So how do you kind of see this new movement this summer? I feel like it's really popped off.
Look, I mean, I think it's a meta thing, right? Like Donald Trump is changing like what is traditional decorum and traditional behavior on social media. Like he's posting memes that some people, even Republicans, might think are somewhat disrespectful. Elon Musk changed the game when he said $420 funding secured, and like even though there was a $20 fine, it's basically irrelevant. Like in the meantime, a bunch of shorts got blown up and then probably never got compensation for that, even though the tweet was false. Like everybody's blurring the lines. It's happening at the highest levels. The president, the richest person in the world. What's happening here is quite small. I do think there's a lot of gray area, right? There are a lot of things where you have to use your best judgment. I'm an investor first, so like I enjoy X. A lot of it's entertainment for me. I actually use it mostly as a reverse indicator. To the extent at which the entire feed is going a certain direction, that's almost always a great time to consider maybe going the other direction. So for me, and I'm not easily psychologically manipulated because I tend to always be skeptical. A lot of Bitcoiners are like that. But I read the feed and I don't think, oh, I should do what everybody's saying. I read the feed and say, I wonder what's wrong with this argument. So that's how I use it. I think a lot of people probably need to be honest with themselves and recognize, like, look, you have to be a mature adult to use these platforms. Think about all the teenage girls who've been hurt by using Instagram, TikTok. I mean, it's well documented. Like a lot of them are depressed. People have never been like more depressed. They've never been more like insular and not going out in public, not drinking, not having sex, right? It's a whole broader issue. So I think social media can be wonderful. Like before social media, like you had to get mainstream gatekeepers to allow you to speak. And so that's great. Like we've now entered a society where anyone can have a voice. The downside of that is there's less sort of fact checking, right? There's less, it's hard to understand what's real news, what isn't. Like there's lots of, gray area there. I can't be the arbiter of that. I can't solve that. I can only use my best judgment to use these platforms in a way that like hopefully adds some value. I think your follower count and like your general reputation is like the best barometer for that. Like if you're adding value, then people will read your stuff. Like if you go through my replies on it, when I talk about this space, people will one after another say, I'm so glad, like everybody was trying to scare me out of IREN at $2 and I stayed in, and I didn't tell them to do that. I just told them what I'm doing. I said, I'm not selling. Yeah. I'm not selling Cypher at $1 or $2, right? I'm not selling IREN at $2, $3, right? Putting aside the fact that as a board member, like there's blackout windows and general counsel approval and now a Form 4. Like if I'm selling IREN, even to pay my taxes, like the whole internet's going to go crazy. So I just pay the taxes through other income. Not everybody has that option. I think more people should do that, especially if they're wealthy, but people still sell stock and it looks like they're selling the stock. No, they're just paying their taxes because they have no liquidity.
Yeah.
That's a personal problem. It's a personal problem I don't have, but
yeah.
I've never sold a share of IREN, and I may not for some long period of time. So look, I can't speak for anyone else. I don't know. I'm not the guy who can give you the answer on like what's right or wrong. I think you can view it a lot of different ways. Yeah. And I just try to, again, with the exception of my shit posting and like the stuff I do for fun, like when I'm seriously posting, I'm just generally telling people my honest assessment and analysis of situations. And you'll see a lot of the time, I may be the only voice saying certain things, especially at inflection points when like the whole internet's losing their minds. Like, this is the end. I remember Silicon Valley Bank, like this is going to change the technology industry forever. And we're never going to come back from this. And I was in a space with Mark Cuban and I'm like, no, like they're going to bail us out on Sunday. And like, we won't even be talking about this a week later. And that's exactly what happened. I mean, nobody believed that at the time. I got yelled down in the space and then booted from the space because they're like, he's dismissing this too fast. This is so serious. This is the end of the world. And anytime you see people overreacting, you can almost always fade that in markets. And again, I'm a professional investor first. Like I'm not a social psychologist, right? I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a police officer. I'm not a social media moderator. Like I'm none of those things. I'm not even really a social media influencer. I have influence on social media, but only in so much as I'm talking about investing. Yeah. Right. So like it's just an extension of basically I sit at my desk, I'm doing my job, watching the markets, I'm trading, right? I'm making decisions. And when I see stuff that kind of comes to mind, I post it. Right. There's no team. There's nobody like curating content. Like I don't sit around thinking about how do I get more followers or whatever. Like if it happens because I post something that people find interesting. Yeah. And because I'm so real time, like I don't censor myself in advance. I go back and delete tweets later because they're literally moments in time. They're like, this is what I thought about the way the market was trading at 8:25 a.m. It's really only relevant if you read it that hour. Mm-hmm. It's not relevant the next day or two. Mm-hmm. It's not in context. So I delete it. And people lose their minds about that. I'm like, look, if you have a team of people editing all your tweets, like, and you post 3 tweets a week that are highly curated, like you can do whatever the hell you want with your Twitter account. I'm gonna do what I want with mine. Yeah. And the reason why people like mine and they have me on notifications is because I post stuff live that's literally off the cuff, like my perception in that exact moment I'm sharing with you live. Yeah. I don't record my spaces either on purpose because they're only valuable, I think, if you listen to them at the moment in time they're created. Yeah. And I'm not interested in recording it so you can listen to it in 3 weeks. Like it's not interesting to me. And I want to sort of reward the people who want to be there live because that's when I think the content's most valuable. Gotcha. So that's my style, but it's not for everybody, right? And if it works, it works. But because I'm not optimizing for audience and I'm not monetizing it directly, like I don't really care what anyone thinks about it.
2 more questions because the crowd's getting silent downstairs and we're going to jump down there. First question. So you've broken news on the industry quite a few times.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Fortunately.
Sometimes accidentally.
Sometimes accidentally. One, what have been some reactions from peers in the industry, investors, executives, others you talked to in the industry when you've broken news? And 2, how does that fit into your role at IREN as a board member? Like, I'm curious just for personal edification, if that like has ever come into conflict there, or if that's like something that like it literally doesn't matter.
It hasn't been a conflict to date because like I make a lot of predictions about Bitcoin, about markets, about M&A outside of like I'll say I think this would be like I predicted basically CoreWeave and Core Scientific like a few weeks before. Look, I make a lot of calls, right? Because that's what I do for a living. Yeah. And actually like my goal is to be right like 55 or 60% of the time. You only find out how good you are if you make a lot of calls. So occasionally I'll make a call and it comes out right. I go, oh crap. Like if I had known for sure I was going to be right, then I obviously wouldn't have posted it. Mm-hmm. I only posted because I didn't know I was right. And I wanted to test the hypothesis. So people tend to understand that. Yeah, there have been some situations that obviously with the benefit of hindsight and like knowing exactly what was going to happen, maybe I would have done it differently. Yeah. But there are also things that those companies could have done differently. Like if I approach them and I say, hey, like I think this is going to happen, all you have to do is say, oh crap, like you're right. Do you mind not tweeting about it? I'm never going to do anything intentionally ever.
Do you normally reach out before, or is it just
in some cases where I have said something and the response like basically helped me make the deduction that it might be true. Yeah. And look, I've apologized in some cases. We've broken bread. We've forgiven each other type of thing. Yeah. It's a rough and tumble, like emerging space. And
I've been in the same situation, by the way. So I've broken news and
it's a space where like everybody's doing their best and pushing hard. And I think it's a net benefit to everyone to have influential people that like the mass market starts to respect, because like I'm bringing eyeballs to the whole space. And so you don't get everything perfectly. You ask for forgiveness when required. And certainly like the key thing is just to avoid like the clear red lines in terms of legality, which I'm really well versed in. So a lot of stuff people will think, wow, that's pretty aggressive, but it's actually entirely legal. Does it mean I have to do it every time? Absolutely not. And certainly in certain situations, like where I didn't say anything, I knew something, but I didn't say it. Right. So there's probably like 10 times as many times where I could have said something and didn't.
Yeah.
But we're just going to remember the ones I did. You don't remember the counterfactuals of the things I could have said.
Yeah.
But look, I try to be careful. I try to be collegial and supportive of as many companies as I can. But part of my credibility comes from the fact that I'm independent enough that I don't really have to care what anyone thinks. So if somebody doesn't like me, I don't care that much, right? Like it's not important to me to be well liked. In fact, I actually don't think you can be a world-class investor if you spend a lot of time trying to be liked. So if I see somebody doing that, I'm definitely not investing with them because it means they'll be easily co-opted by management teams. It means they'll easily be co-opted by narratives. They'll probably buy into whatever the consensus narrative is at a given time. And there's no way to generate exceptional investment performance if that's the way you think.
Yeah.
So there's just some of this is nature. Like if I wasn't a little bit aggressive, if I wasn't a little bit abrasive, if I wasn't a little bit contrarian, it wasn't a little bit tough to deal with, then I wouldn't be good.
Yeah.
Right. And my goal is to be good first, to provide for my family, to provide, exceptional to my small group of LPs, which may never number more than 2 or 3.
Yeah.
If I do it right, like I'd like to get to $1 billion with like 2 LPs.
Okay.
Be like one of the only funds in history to do that from scratch, largely via investment performance, not via fundraising.
Okay. Last question for you. Do we see a drawback, and how does your fund manage that, or have you like mapped out that
drawdown?
If there's a drawdown in Bitcoin, like we always have
had 3 drawdowns, 50% drawdowns of Bitcoin miners this cycle.
Okay,
we've had 3. It's hard to even put that in context. We've had 3 depressions.
Yeah,
like a normal equity investor does not want to experience a 50% drawdown more than once, like every 30 to 50 years.
Yeah,
and we just did it in 2.5 years. So it's kind of too late now to ask that because we've already done it. There's always going to be drawdowns, but again, my structure is such that I have more of a permanent capital mindset. I do not manage towards short-term volatility quite actively. I do think there will be an opportunity over the next year or two to rotate into more defensive sort of value names, and I do hope to stick that landing when it happens. But I also think that the biggest risk right now is to be underexposed and to sell too soon. Yeah, and I think a lot of people overmanage for minimizing a 5 or 10% drawdown, and they miss the 500% or 1,000% return that you often get in this space. And one other comment I'd leave you with is crypto funds typically go up 800, 900, 1,000%. But the problem is they don't do any hedging or any defensive. They end up giving back 80, 90%, right? Like during the next cycle. And so then when you net it all out, it's a rather pedestrian looking return, like 15% when it could have been 50. CAGRs over a couple decades if they just played a little bit of defense. And so a lot of my strategy is around bringing traditional value-oriented principles that come from like Graham, Dodd, Buffett, and applying it to this space. And that's one of the reasons why I like these infrastructure companies. I can underwrite them 2.5 years ago really well because they have hard assets that have optionality value for other forms of compute like AI, something that we were talking about at IREN 3, 4, 5 years ago. Again, another source of edge for me is taking the concepts that you learn and develop in the context of being a board member and then applying them more broadly in other situations where you're not a board member, so you have more flexibility to trade. So anyway, that's what I do, and so far so good. Like things are on track. Like it's been a really good cycle. But for Bitcoin mining in particular, it was a very frustrating cycle up until very recently. And even now, if you're in the pure play and you never got into AI and you didn't understand that thesis a year and a half ago or a year ago, like you're way behind the people that did. But it's not too late to reposition. I think there's still a lot of upside left for anyone who has real AI optionality, over the next year or two.
Mike, Alfred, thanks for joining the podcast. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Will.